Madam Council President, Council members, Mr. City Attorney and City Controller, to our general managers and our chiefs, to my mother and father, my beloved wife and daughter, honored guests and Angelenos, and of course our Super Bowl champion LA Rams. Good morning and thank you. And thank you, Kenya, for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You see, it was nearly 9 years ago on a sweltering June day that Kenya was there when I raised my hand and I swore allegiance to our Constitution and our city charter, and I took the oath of office. In fact, it was Kenya Castillo who administered the oath that day. Now, I know it wasn't an obvious choice. She wasn't a governor or a senator or a judge. Kenya was just an 8th grader at Luther Burbank Middle School. But I asked Kenya, the daughter of a janitor, to swear me in because I wanted us to see our city's future through her eyes and through her dreams. I wanted to be clear about where my power, our power, comes from, and who my greatest responsibility was to. Those everyday Angelenos who work hard to do better and to build a stronger city. Well, Kenya is 22 today. She just finished her first year at Cal State Dominguez Hills, where she's now a junior. And she's grown up just as our city has grown up too over the last decade as well. But one thing about her hasn't changed. She wants to make a difference. Kenya's goal after graduation is to represent service workers, janitors just like her mother, to lend her voice to those searching for the courage to speak up for themselves. I'm so grateful, Kenya, that it was your voice that I heard that day in 2013, the voice of an everyday Angeleno, giving me the words I spoke to become your mayor. In 2013, I told the people of LA that I would work every day to accomplish 2 things. First, to get your city hall back to the basics by restoring and expanding those core city services that we depend on. And second, to build a city of the future with greater economic opportunity and stronger infrastructure across all of our neighborhoods. And I also knew we had to grow our city's resilience for any emergencies we might face. So the next day, day 1, I went out to the valley and got back to the basics and paved a street. And today, a pothole gets filled almost 6 days faster than it did in 2014. And 2/3 of our streets are rated in good condition versus less than half back on my first day in office. I said after years of hearing no from ourselves and from others that we would build more housing, lay down more metro lines, get transit to the airport, replace our broken pipes and sagging power lines, invest in our aging port, increase our resiliency, raise our minimum wage to reduce poverty, expand access to college, and get your 311 and DWP calls answered, and answered fast. Well, in just a couple years, you'll be able to fly home into a beautiful and reborn airport at LAX, hop on transit right from the terminal, connect directly to the new Crenshaw LAX line, ride through Destination Crenshaw through revitalized corridors where housing is rising at 3 times the rate as when I started. And ride through a city that led the movement to raise the minimum wage, reduced poverty by 27%, and quadrupled the number of youth jobs. And it won't be long before that train will drop you off at the brand new Lucas Museum or at many of the 12,000 affordable and supportive housing units called home by people, many of whom once lived in tents. And 6 summers from now, you'll ride right to the Coliseum for the opening ceremonies of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. You see, in LA, we've never been a city with small ambitions. From our humble beginnings as a dusty pueblo built on the original Tongva land that we now inhabit, to our emergence as the 3rd largest urban economy in the world, we do big things in LA. And I work alongside nearly 55,000 brilliant, committed Angelenos, public servants who might not be able to predict the next fire or flood, the next power outage or pandemic, but who are always ready to fix what's wrong in LA and to respond to the threats we face. To our 1,000 great purposes in LA, we added a grave one these past 763 days. No one saw a pandemic on the horizon, but the city of LA was prepared to meet it when it came. Our battle with COVID was both our darkest and our finest moment. But today, as we assess the state of our city, this epic battle has left us tired and bruised, but we're also healing. This week, hospitalizations are at their lowest point since last July. COVID isn't over, but its grip is loosening. We'll still see more surges, need to be prepared to confront new variants. But as we do the hard work of helping the last of our neighbors to get protected and to get well, we do so not battle-weary, but battle-tested. Today, a hurt city roars back to life, renewed, recovering, and remembering that in LA, we don't run from our big challenges, we rise to them, just as this bridge rises above the river that gives our city its very name. I love this bridge. I could name 10 more big new job sites I would have loved to show off to Los Angeles today. Museums, transit, housing, waterworks. But we came here, to this 6th Street viaduct, high above the riverbank where our city got its start. 10 years ago, this bridge was a bright idea to replace a ruin. 2 years ago, there was empty air where my feet stand today. And today, a ribbon of arches connects our city center to the east side, where my own family's story started here 100 years ago. And this summer, when this new landmark opens to all of us, to foot and bike and bus and car, it will be a symbol of a city on its way back. You see, this bridge was born from our ambition, but it was built by everyday Angelenos, like you and me. Engineers like Principal Civil Engineer Julie Allen, who is here with us today, who was joined by a disproportionately high number of tradeswomen and men in building this living gift to the next Los Angeles, a literal bridge that spans the generations. Now, my friends, I'm going to confess right now, this will not be the shortest State of the City address that I ever give, but I guarantee you it will be my last. And I want to talk to you in this last address about two of our most pressing needs in the short term, reflected in the last budget that I'm submitting to our City Council today. And then I want to talk about the two greatest challenges we face in the long term, the work that we have done to face them, and a call to arms to continue that work for tomorrow's leaders. First, simply put, we need to ensure that this is the safest and the cleanest city it can be. And second, we have to build a Los Angeles that is prosperous and protected by doubling down on our work to build more housing and address our climate emergency. Our work is urgent and important. Because even as I speak, some of you are reaching out to your city government. You're calling to ask if the next book in that series your child loves has arrived at the library. You're using our app to schedule a bulky item pickup to take away your old dresser, or you're emailing to see when there's a swimming class at your neighborhood pool. You're calling 311 to clean up garbage where there shouldn't be garbage, or you're calling 911 because there's smoke where there shouldn't be smoke. 39 city departments committed to serving you. The biggest has enough people to fill the Hollywood Bowl, the smallest to fill out a string quartet. They all answer those calls. They get to work every day to make you less upset or scared and more hopeful and empowered. And you know what? Those city departments work together like never before. For me, getting back to basics, getting back in sync was one of the most important parts of our agenda. And now we have a new culture at City Hall, a culture of collaboration that we have to keep expanding and continuing, because we're going to need it for what comes next. In our city, a city older than the US Constitution, but a city reinvented every day, we work towards 1,000 human purposes, but we exist for one magnificent need: to make a good life together. We're living through a year of transition, from pandemic to renewal, and from one administration to the next. This calendar year will close on a new mayor's first month in office. After nearly 21 years of service at City Hall, almost 9 as your mayor, I get asked a lot these days by reporters, what's your legacy? I believe it's not my role to define that, nor something, quite frankly, I waste much time thinking about. With the precious time that I have left as your mayor, I'm more focused on your future than interpreting my past. The only legacy I want you to know is that I deeply, deeply love this city, and that I served for 2 decades to make it better, to give you and LA everything I have. And I've been inspired and sustained in this service by working side by side with you, our city workers, neighborhood council members, student leaders, volunteers, activists, clergy, community organizations, and block clubs and parents. And one of the greatest joys of being mayor has been witnessing you, my fellow Angelenos, put the joy in your heart and the strength in your body towards building a better city. Let us never, never take our power and our purpose to serve others for granted. As we wake up and see heartbreaking images of people who are fighting and dying to protect their democracy, let us remember how lucky we are. Let us not focus on launching recalls and picking fights with one another, but on figuring out how to build the coalitions and engage in the hard day-to-day work, the compromises and sacrifices that are key to doing big things. You see, this bridge where we are gathered wasn't built somewhere else and delivered for a fee. It didn't come out of arguments and division. It was built one beam, one pour, one bolt at a time, by a unified team working together until something new and beautiful and powerful arose. We go nowhere without one another. And I believe each generation and each administration passes this work forward to the next. I had the fortune to build on the great work that began long before I took my place in it. Mayor Bradley, who knew that the Olympics could make a profit to fund youth sports for generations and left us a template for the 2028 Games. Mayor Hahn, who kept our city whole when its separation was a foregone conclusion. Mayor Villaraigosa, who dreamed that our transit system could reach the sea. You see, we leave behind us seeds in a garden, not presents under a tree. And I know it can be tough today to remember that from inside a one-click culture where we expect same-day delivery of solutions to our challenges, that the challenges we face require resilience and determination, unity of purpose, and yes, patience. My goal is to hand over a city budget to our council that is stronger than ever, an infrastructure program unequaled in our nation, and a pathway to house our people and save our planet with the urgency that this moment demands. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how our budget confronts 2 of our short-term great pressing needs. Your city needs to be safe. It needs to be beautiful. It needs to deliver its services effectively. And the fact is, year 1 or year 9, we have no intention of letting up our commitment to that safe, beautiful, effective city. First, a cleaner city is on its way. Last year, our Clean LA Jobs program hired 100 young people through our Office of Community Beautification, folks who were re-entering society from incarceration or even formerly unhoused Angelenos. Well, guess what? This year, we're planning to hire not just 100, but nearly 800 new sanitation workers. These will be our neighbors, hired to care for our neighborhoods, so that no 3rd grader walking to school will see a city filled with trash or an off-ramp cluttered with litter. And you will see the results that they deliver in your neighborhood. Right now, it takes us 7 days to respond to illegal dumping cleanup requests. We're going to bring that down to 3. And thank you to Councilmember O'Farrell for partnering with us to get this done. In every council district, Care Plus teams will provide badly needed services to our folks in encampments, providing public health and hygiene for them and facilitating their move towards housing. But second, this budget will also bring about a safer city. Now, I know that public safety is top of mind for many of us. And while Los Angeles is safer today than it was in years past, and far safer than it was a generation ago, every act of violence casts a long shadow. From every conversation I have with the families of victims, from Every time someone's home or car is broken into, I know it violates our peace of mind. It forces us to retreat, and our response requires urgency and resources. Crime spiked across America during this pandemic. Police officers felt demoralized. Communities felt let down, disconnected, and even disrespected by public safety strategies. Our mental health crises spiked, and too many people armed themselves with too many guns. So we went to work. And in 2021, LAPD and our gun buyback program got over 9,000 guns off our streets and doubled the number of seized ghost guns, those untraceable guns linked to 19 homicides in our city in the last year alone, guns that City Attorney Feuer has targeted with lawsuits. Today, homicides are down 7% last year, even as that number rises in other cities. And altogether, since 2013, we've taken nearly 70,000 dangerous weapons off our streets. On Monday, I joined President Biden at the White House, where we stood with a young woman, Mia Treta. She lost her best friend, Dominic Blackwell, in the 2019 school shooting at Saugus High School in Santa Clarita, and she too was shot. Flying home, I ran into Dominic's parents and talked to them, a reminder of what our entire world loses when one life is lost. And this is why this work matters. Since I've been mayor, I've continued to improve our department and its work and expand our public safety partnerships. Since I've been mayor, we've added on average more than 700,000 more patrol hours to your neighborhoods, a year to our city since 2013, while we ended pretextual stops at the same time. We've lifted up our heroes in the LAPD, equipped them with body cams, trained them on de-escalation, how to better recognize bias, upgraded their cars and technologies, and expanded the Community Safety Partnership, a national model for engaging communities and building trust. And when crime went up 6 years ago, we helped support the department in their work. But we also widened the circle beyond just the LAPD. We expanded domestic abuse response teams to serve domestic violence victims in every division in our city. We grew GRID, our gang reduction and youth development program, to cover 50% more territory with skilled and brave interventionists who keep the peace. When we saw an alarming rise in smash and grab and follow home robberies, we let our detectives go to work and again saw the results. And since the end of last year, smash and grabs have fallen 56%, and we've made crucial arrests to disrupt follow home robbery rings. And while police are making those critical arrests, and COVID's threat becomes more manageable, we need our judicial system to both protect and reform. We need our courts to open, our jails to transform, and much more takes place on our streets long before people ever come into contact with the justice system. The alternatives to policing and incarceration that we know we so badly need have taken off here in LA. In partnership with LA County, we launched one of the nation's most ambitious mental health response programs, sending vans out into our communities 24/7 through 911 to provide critically needed psychiatric care. Since the start of the year, we've deployed our 2 therapeutic vans 278 times from fire stations downtown and on the west side. And get this, over 90% of the people that we reached, rather than being transported to a hospital and released with no help, were treated on scene or transported to the mental health care that they need. Instead of taking firefighters and police officers off the streets for hours to try to address mental health problems, we're giving people that are suffering the help that they need and that our city demands. Our budget funds these 2 vans and will add 3 more in South LA and the Valley, together giving us the capacity to respond to 9,000 traumatic calls by year's end to end that trauma we see on our streets. And thank you to Councilmember Rodriguez and others for making this a reality. CIRCLE, which stands for Crisis and Incident Response through Community-Led Engagement, a program that meets people where they are with proactive, sustained outreach on our streets, diverting non-emergency 911 calls related to homelessness to more mental health care experts and crisis workers, many of whom have lived on the streets themselves. Since launching November, our teams have provided over 160 new housing referrals. And in this year alone, our unarmed CIRCLE teams have responded to more than 1,200 situations in Hollywood and Venice. So in the coming fiscal year, we're going to double the number of Circle teams, expand their reach to new neighborhoods across our city. Our suicide prevention work, in partnership with Dee Dee Hirsch, diverted over 1,400 calls last year to experts who saved lives. You see, as we widen the circle of justice, we don't just become safer. Our public safety efforts become more just. Our goals are clear. Bring down violence and crime this year, build more trust, and break the cycle of violence and incarceration by co-owning and co-authoring our public safety mission. We've made this progress because from day one, we elevated equity in all the core functions of the city. We've responded to calls and crises alike with an eye on the debts of history that we must pay down, and on the future city that we dream of building up. This was the guiding light of the historic justice budget that I and the City Council passed last year. Here in this city, we have launched historic anti-poverty programs, made community college free, invested in our key industries, and cut our business tax and our bureaucracy to be more business friendly. This approach is rooted in a definition of justice that goes far beyond the courthouse, to dismantle the systems that depress student achievement and maintain our addiction to poverty. And as we do that work, we've boosted community college attendance from our public schools by 40%, creating opportunities for young people in our tech and entertainment industries. But for all of these gains, we have to talk about the one long-term obstacle that blocks our path to full economic opportunity and well-being. This barrier is a thief that steals our paychecks. It adds hours to our commutes. It chokes our air and it chases away our prosperity. It's been decades in the making. And let's be clear, it is a failure, our failure, LA's failure, California's failure. Simply put, we have not built enough housing for the people of LA. Dreams made become dreams deferred, become dreams departed, when businesses and families pull up stakes for twice the square footage at half the price somewhere else. And those who can't relocate live with less and less and less opportunity. For nearly 9 years, I and this City Council have focused intensely on this, and we have made progress to change this equation dramatically. From 2013 to 2019, get this, we tripled, not 10 or 20% increase, tripled the number of housing units built each year in LA, a 300% increase. We increased our annual production of permanent supportive housing units, proven to get and keep people out of homelessness, by 600%. 600%. But this didn't happen automatically. It didn't just emerge from the marketplace. We achieved this through the voters, through hard work, through important reforms, and by embracing powerful tools like our transit-oriented communities, which have added new units and record numbers of affordable housing along our bus and rail lines, and built more affordable housing without a subsidy. And when Metro finishes building some of the 15 rail and rapid transit lines that we are underway with, we will use the land left over from construction staging to develop more affordable housing next to our stations. Metro's affordable housing goals are the strongest in the nation, so that we push people to transit opportunities instead of pushing them away from the neighborhoods where they live today. Here in LA, we fell in love. We fell in love with accessory dwelling units. ADUs gently add homes to our backyards while preserving our community character. We just saw the completion of our 10,000th ADU. It's going up behind a blue ranch house on Victory Boulevard in North Hollywood. We changed state environmental laws. We streamlined city approvals. And now affordable developments go to the front of the line. They're protected from those frivolous lawsuits and get approved on average 120 days quicker. And after decades of talk, we created the Affordable Housing Linkage Fee, a permanent source of funding for affordable housing construction, so we don't have to go hat in hand to Sacramento and DC every year. It's already funded affordable housing to the tune of nearly $60 million of subsidy and is projected to generate $100 million over the next 3 years. We passed the largest initiative to build housing for homeless Americans, Prop HHH. And don't believe everything you might hear about HHH. HHH units are coming in cheaper, faster, and more plentifully than we promised voters. We already have 1,200 units occupied. We'll open 39 more projects with 2,000 more units of permanent supportive housing by year's end. And HHH will help us get to nearly 12,000 units of new housing to keep people from becoming or being unhoused. I'm proud of these accomplishments that we've done together, and none of them were easy. But I'm going to say this straight, that if we don't keep it up, if we don't double down on our housing momentum, the California dream will be an old chapter in a distant history book. But if we get it right, we've got the people, the weather, the creativity, the investments in infrastructure to see our brightest chapter yet written in the years ahead. But we're all going to need to sacrifice. But if we do, we will all gain. Bureaucrats will have to tear out even more old rules out of the book and work with even more speed and more generosity. Neighborhood gatekeepers will have to say goodbye to an outdated zoning vision that has helped extinguish our city's dreams. Developers will have to share in the profits to make sure that the working poor and the forgotten middle have options. And our state government will have to make the abuse of environmental laws a thing of the past and fund even more housing affordability. Today, I will tell you how LA can get this done and what we're doing in this budget to take this momentum to the next level. It starts by being honest and being ambitious, honest numbers and bold goals. Every 8 years, our state government makes local governments set their housing goals. It's something called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Process, or RHNA. In 2018, the state changed this formula, tripling the goal for Southern California from what it was before. Many cities pushed back, but we stood firm. We embraced what our future and the California dream demands: more housing and less sprawl, less traffic and less pollution. And we won the day with bold new housing goals that are shared throughout our region. In the past 8 years, RHNA challenged us here in LA to hit 82,000 new homes. We roared past that with 150,000 new homes, by far the biggest city in California to hit and exceed our goal. But I'm proud to stand here today and announce the next goal for housing. In our housing element that will be implemented in our general plan, commits us not to build 150,000, but nearly 457,000 new units by the year 2029. And I challenge the next mayor to hit that goal, even blow past it. It won't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. And let me tell you what the stakes are, in the words of a fellow dad I spoke to when my daughter Maya was at camp with his daughter. This man was a valley boy like me. He said, I grew up in the valley where my grandfather bought his house for $5,000. Can you imagine? Then he said, my parents bought the house I grew up in for $50,000. And then he was working in Hollywood as a lighting guy. He said, I saved up and I bought my house in the valley for $500,000. It was a stretch, but we made it work. But then he turned to me, his face somewhat ashen, and he said, but if my daughter has to spend $5 million to own a home here, then our California dream is dead. You see, that's the story for all of us. It feels like every time we save a dollar, prices rise by 2 or 3. And of course, that's not the worst of it. For too many, that dimming California dream is already a nightmare. It's embodied in the story of Caitlin Hill, a woman who called City Hall, reached out to the mayor's help desk in my office last November. I set up a help desk on day 1 of being mayor, and it's been virtual throughout the pandemic. But Caitlin called us, described how she'd spent 5 years trying to find housing, never knowing where her family would sleep from one day to the next, staying with different relatives, asking for help and not getting it. But Tanaz Gulshan from my homelessness team took her call, and things started to open up. Caitlin and her 2 beautiful children, her 5-year-old boy and 2-year-old girl, moved first into a bridge home, Casa Azul, near MacArthur Park, something that Councilmember Cedillo poured his heart and passion into to get built. We worked successfully to get her an emergency housing voucher. And voucher in hand, Tanaz took her to an apartment we located in the valley, and her son went right inside, took off his shoes, made himself comfortable, and this little kid with deep relief and wisdom, said, "This is our new home." I'm so proud of Caitlin and her children, but we've got to open more doors more quickly. We've got to commit, all of us, to saying yes. You see, without a landlord saying yes, Caitlin might still today be unhoused. But through our lease-up program, landlords are saying yes, holding open apartments for our unhoused neighbors in a system that comes with serious incentives. But today we have over 3,300 emergency housing vouchers right now for people waiting for an apartment. So my plea to property owners and property managers, if you saw someone go to sleep in a tent last night, be a part of the solution. Be part of bringing them inside this morning. Go to leaseupla.org and give a family like Caitlin's a chance at hope and a home. How will we build the LA that we dream of? Together, with all of our tools. Let's make transit-oriented communities permanent and build hundreds of thousands of new homes. Let's expand our adaptive reuse laws so now that many of our beautiful commercial buildings that are empty as a result of the pandemic get tens of thousands more homes too. Let's erase the rules that concentrate housing, transit, and jobs and shopping far away from one another, and instead build beautiful boulevards of opportunity across LA. Boulevards that let you walk downstairs to dinner, down the block to shop, and onto transit to go to work the next morning. And let's lean into SB 9. The state law that lets you put 4 homes on a single-family lot. Los Angeles is the cradle of American residential innovation, from our beloved bungalow courtyards to our superstar case study homes. 4 homes on a lot is not something new. It's actually quite old. And remember ADUs? Remember how people used to fear that ADUs were going to ruin a neighborhood, and now they're loved? We helped that happen by getting our best local architects and engineers to create forward-looking designs that you can now get over-the-counter approval for today and start building tomorrow. So today I'm announcing we're going to do the same thing for SB 9 development, and we're calling it the Low Rise Design Lab. It's starting with a $500,000 budget in our planning department, and we're going to carve out a new California vernacular with creativity, quadplexes, and LA light. And I'm also proud to announce that we have doubled and redoubled our homelessness budget 5 times. And this year we're going to meet and match our justice budget from last year with over $1 billion to house our unhoused neighbors. And let me challenge whoever comes next to do everything that you can to keep pushing that number higher and higher until homelessness is a distant memory in LA. Here in LA, we've built 10 tiny home villages in just over 1 year, starting in Councilmember Krikorian's district, including the biggest one in the country in Councilmember De Leon's. We opened 20 new bridge home shelters in 24 months, blowing past our initial goal of 15 in the midst of a pandemic, now reaching 27 across LA. And with leaders like Councilmember Lee, we're doing more outreach in every part of the city, from the valley to the harbor. We can write a budget that grapples with our existential problems because our economy is growing, our strategies are working, because for the last 9 years we didn't kick the can down the road when it came to our infrastructure. When I started as your mayor, our airport was still a nightmare. Our streets were crumbling, our bridges were unsafe, and our transit lines, well, they just weren't being built. We took on the largest infrastructure ambitions of our lifetime, of any city in America, billions of dollars, and now you can start seeing the results. We're in the midst of a massive $15 billion capital improvement program at our world-class airport, together with Councilmember Bonin, and we ensured it would be a first-class neighbor to the folks around. And we accelerated that work during the pandemic. We've invested almost $2.5 billion at the economic engine of our port with Councilmember Buscaino, and its workers saved Christmas and Hanukkah and shattered cargo records while doing it. Today, we create in Los Angeles jobs more quickly than the other 4 largest metro regions in the country. We're experiencing a 21% economic boom since April 2020. We've boosted black and brown incomes by 44 and 43% respectively, when the nation has seen them rise by just 26 and 34%. We expanded our film tax credit, promoted aerospace, cut taxes on small businesses. We're producing great paying, recession-proof middle-class careers. Those good careers change lives, like that of Freddie Rios, who's here today. Freddie, thank you for joining us. I met Freddie with Councilmember Bonin a few weeks ago and heard his story as we opened up a beautiful new terminal at LAX. Freddie moved to LA last year with his pregnant wife and young son, and they were really struggling. His criminal record stood in the way of work. Their low credit score put stable housing out of reach, and they ended up in a shelter. But PATH, People Assisting the Homeless, got them on their feet, and a great contractor working at the airport, Hensel Phelps, took our local hire provision seriously, gave Freddie a chance, and gave Freddie a job. Today, he's earning union wages as a construction worker, a laborer at LAX. I met him when we cut the ribbon on that terminal that he helped build. For the first time in his life, Freddie has a bank account and a credit card. And Freddie, his wife, and their sons, 7 years and 5 months old, are on a great and stable path forward. You see, Freddie, you're what's at stake when we talk about our economy. Families like yours, their lives, their futures. We're working to end this nation's addiction to poverty in LA by investing in our families and our people, by putting nearly $1.1 billion in rental and utility assistance out to tens of thousands of households to keep them from falling into homelessness in the pandemic. This year, we made Metro free for all kids and community college students. We're investing nearly $40 million alongside Councilmember Price, among others, in the largest guaranteed basic income program in America, which we call Big Leap. In LA, we don't just do one big thing at a time. We do many big things, and we do them together. So my final note today isn't just for our city. It's about our planet and the work ahead to save it. One of the things I love, and I know that you love, about LA is what's all around us. I mean, look at this day. Our weather, it is the most beautiful anywhere on the face of the earth. Here in LA, we can commune with nature in the midst of a dense city. And long before I stepped foot in City Hall, I connected to the natural world through my connection to this city. Whether walking along the Los Angeles River with my father and sister as a young man, where I dreamt of its potential, or my first internship with tree people in high school, where I learned how to plant the seedlings of a healthier city, or growing up next to 2 freeways where I saw family members and neighbors end up getting cancer and understood how environmentalism and justice have to connect. In City Hall, I've witnessed and helped lead a breathtaking change in how we think about our environment. After a century-long war with the Owens Valley, we went up and made peace, returning more water to the valley while sourcing more water locally. In New Mexico, I recently traveled as we opened the largest wind farm in hemispheric history. We're building the cheapest solar energy and storage project in the country in the Mojave Desert. We're expanding solar power to communities in South LA where it once seemed out of reach. In less than 2 decades, we have made LA America's solar capital and boosted our carbon-free power to 62%. I remember when it was only 2% renewable when I walked into City Hall. We took a utility that on my first day in City Hall was mostly burning coal, whose pipes were bursting, power poles falling, which kept customers on hold on my first day as mayor for 40 minutes, I know because my dad told me, and had no independent oversight, and we turned it around. Today, the great people at DWP answer calls in under 2 minutes. And on Monday, we announced the hiring of DWP's first Inspector General, who will ensure our money is spent responsibly and who will safeguard against any abuse of the public trust. To the next mayor and the future councils of the city, we will pass on the work of City Hall, of environmentalists, everyday Angelenos who have written the most powerful Green New Deal in America. After years of organizing, and thanks to this council, including council members Wesson and Koretz, we are ending oil drilling in our backyards. Can we take that in for a moment? Can we breathe that in? Because long before the first director shouted action in Hollywood, LA was actually built as an oil town. That's not the close of a chapter, that's the beginning of a new book. And through our EV car share program, we're expanding access to electric mobility in our lowest income neighborhoods, while our city buses will be all electric by 2028. And this month we joined with the Port of Los Angeles to launch our Clean Truck Fund so that that economic juggernaut of the San Pedro Bay Port Complex will run on 0 emissions in the years ahead. And today, I'm proud to announce that our budget will also include a brand new 2-phase $21 million climate equity fund, something that would have not come together without the passion and the persistence of my dear friend, our Council President, Nury Martinez. This climate equity fund will center our mitigation and resilience efforts in the low-income neighborhoods that bear a disproportionate amount of environmental harm. And through the fund, we're going to hire and train underrepresented and displaced workers to retrofit community-serving buildings for energy efficiency. We're going to monitor the air at oil drilling sites in these communities until they're gone and make our data public. We're going to distribute to the people of LA air purifiers directly in the neighborhoods that take on the most pollution from the movement of goods and their proximity to freeways. And throughout the low-income communities that have the highest heat indexes, we'll provide new insulation and cool roofs on us that senior on a fixed income who's been suffering through the summer without air conditioning can enjoy. And we're not alone. You see, across the globe, cities like Bogota and London and Seoul have joined Los Angeles in leading the march to sustainable existence while nations play catch-up. Last November, I had the honor to represent our city and to stand before the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow and speak to the world leaders on behalf of 1,049 cities. It was one of the most significant and definitely one of the most moving experiences of my life. The cities of the world earned their place on that stage. Collectively, we pledged to reduce global carbon emissions to the equivalent of the 4th to 5th highest emitting country in the world. You see, in cities, we're remaking the basic building blocks of communal life: water, power, transport, buildings. Here in LA, we use 54% less imported water. And thanks to our ambitious Hyperion 2035 and Operation Next plans, our wastewater plants will soon be able to treat billions of new gallons of water for drinking and irrigation, adding to our local supply the equivalent of 2 LA aqueducts. And year-over-year emissions in LA have gone, get this, down 10% to 24% to 36%. And our historic LA 100 plan shows the way to 100% clean power by 2035. So here's my challenge to the next mayor. Just as we've done, accelerate and get there sooner. And you want a head start? Los Angeles will be entirely coal-free by the end of 2025. You see, we can, we will, we must shrink the carbon impact of our built environment in leaps and bounds as we mandate that our municipal buildings are carbon-free and work with stakeholders so that all buildings are carbon-free soon, thanks to Councilmember Raman's and other council members' leadership. These are among the 445 initiatives of LA's ambitious Green New Deal. They'll get us to carbon neutrality by 2050 or before. And what's more, they'll save 1,650 lives, $16 billion. Oh, and by the way, create 400,000 good-paying green jobs. Follow our plan, and LA will create a zero-carbon energy grid, zero-carbon buildings, zero-carbon transportation, zero waste, and zero wasted water. And when we reach those 5 zeros, we will walk lighter on this land. And we will walk together down those roads where too often our fellow Angelinos have been left in the shadows. You see, because climate justice is our guiding arrow. There's a woman here today who served on the Mayor's Youth Council for Climate Action named Tiana Shaw Wakeman. She came here, was smart enough to move here from Nashville to go to USC. At the time, she wasn't an activist. She didn't know a whole lot about climate change. But then she learned about the Jefferson oil field, not too far from campus, and its impact on communities of color nearby. And it changed her life. So Tiana co-founded Divest SC, the student group that helped get USC to commit to divesting from fossil fuels. She graduated this past spring, USC's first Black valedictorian. And I asked her if she'd be willing to serve. That's right. And I asked her if she'd be willing to serve on our city's new and first Climate Emergency Mobilization Commission. There and in her job at Black Women for Wellness, she helps raise up the voices of underserved communities. If a more environmentally just LA is coming, then I know that Tiana and her fellow activists are going to be the ones to help us get there. Our climate justice commitment goes far beyond righting the wrongs of the past. It's about creating a future of justice and opportunity. Our Just Transition Task Force, which we are leading in partnership with the county, brings together the labor movement and environmental justice advocates, our frontline communities, tribal nations, industry, workforce experts, and more to ensure oil workers in our communities prosper with the new jobs in the LA of the future. But we can also address climate change right now where people live today. It's as simple as planting a tree, like Councilmember Harris Dawson and I did at Mount Carmel Recreation Center in South LA just this past weekend. It was the kind of day in Los Angeles that reminds me I still have the best job in the world. Remember the people that were out there? There was one woman who was selling 4 kinds of locally grown and made hot sauce. Somebody was playing a ukulele. The women who lead the boards for the DWP, Public Works, and Rec and Parks were there. And we put 200 trees in the ground with our neighbors. I wish all of you could have been there. Because we know in LA temperatures go up where incomes go down. Trees are our most elegant tool to combat that, but not our only one. We're painting cool roofs, and with Councilmember Blumenfield's leadership, we're leading the world in cool pavements, over 60 miles in and counting. It's easy to look at all we have to lose and all we need to do to protect our climate, and some days just feel your hope deflate. But the years tell us things that the days cannot see. And let me tell you what I see 20 years in. I'm witnessing change. Change for the better. On the day 20 years ago that I first took elected office in LA, humanity was looking at a nearly 8-degree Fahrenheit rise by the end of this century. In the 2 decades since, our work and the work of scientists and activists, governments and ordinary people has brought that down by almost 2 degrees. You see, every single thing we do matters. And on that day, 20 years and 10 months ago to be precise, I drove downtown to City Hall right there. The only electric vehicle on the street, and I parked under City Hall East. And I found my way out of the biggest parking garage, P4, that I'd ever been in, and worked for my first 2 weeks in City Hall East. You see, that's where our city council had been meeting for more than 7 years after the Northridge earthquake. Because our City Hall, guided skyward by the ambitions and the ideals of our city mothers and fathers, our City Hall was badly damaged in that quake. People knew it wasn't inhabitable. Some thought we should pull it down and start again from scratch. But our better angels and our brilliant engineers carried the day. And we kept that building and we lifted it up. We placed seismic footings that could withstand the most dangerous earthquakes. And most importantly, we protected what we loved from the past while building something bold and stronger for the future. Sometimes, like on this bridge, we do start from scratch and build something brand new that the world's never seen before. And sometimes we carry what's come before along through the through line of history while we write our replacement. I believe that leaders are not elected to be popular, but to make the oftentimes unpopular decisions that history demands, to protect our city before the next earthquake hits, to pay down the debts of history and invest in the future no matter how high the volume is on the crisis at hand. I wish I could invite all of LA to join me on this bridge today, but I'm joined by 4 guests who I've already introduced and whose stories hold powerful dreams for our city. Caitlin with her children, who dream of a Los Angeles where everyone has a place to call home. Tiana, my climate advisor, who dreams of a healthy, beautiful, and just city that belongs to all of us. Freddie, who dreams of owning a home one day and taking vacations with his family, traveling through an airport that he helped build. Kenya, who started me off down this road, who swore me into office as your mayor, who dreams of an LA where we all make a difference. I'm so grateful to all of you and to all of you out there. I'm grateful to my fellow elected officials who have sustained me and been by my side in the toughest of times, and my family who's been there every step of the way. And I'm so grateful to this city, you the leaders who will guide Los Angeles into tomorrow. That police officer I met on Friday at graduation who told me it was the best day of his life. The student I saw yesterday who picked up her first tennis racket in Lincoln Park had nothing but excitement and possibility in her eyes. The new business owner I met with, who once was unhoused on Skid Row, is now designing and making purses in the creative capital of the world. Their dreams, your dreams. These are the dreams we hold. This is the leadership we need. And to the next mayor who will steward a magnificent city alongside these young people and new families, know I will be rooting for you. Get to energy independence. Recycle 100% of our water. Finish those 15 transit lines. Complete those 12,000 supportive housing units and do 12,000 more in half the time. Throw the best Olympic Games this world has ever seen and leave behind a breathtaking legacy of opportunity. Keep bringing crime and poverty down, graduation rates and homes up. Don't forget to balance the budget, as our city controller would say, and build that reserve. Keep your eye on the bond rating. Answer those calls promptly. Push your general managers to do more, and hire the great leaders who will push our city to reach beyond its grasp. 29 years and 10 months ago, I stood on a different bridge, one that spans Main Street instead of this one that spans the LA River. That city council cut a ribbon, and I walked into the most beautiful chamber I'd ever seen. Our city council chamber, that great temple of democracy that embodies our city's hopes. Its ceilings and paintings had been restored. Its fixtures were polished and gleaming. I'd only been there once or twice as a kid, and I had this pinch me feeling. And you know what? It's something I've never really gotten over. Every day I show up, I can't believe I get to do this work. And you know what else? I'm never surprised by this city's greatness, but I'm always still in awe of the things that we make and do here in LA. This time next year, I won't be your mayor. I'll be one more Angelino. And with the exception of Dad, there's no title I cherish more. Los Angeles, I can't wait to see what's next, to see what you dream into reality with your creativity and your heart, and to experience all the ways that our extraordinary Los Angeles will bridge our future. Thank you.